The silent voyage in the heart of the Atlantic, aboard the SS Mariner, the Thompson family set sail for a long-awaited vacation. The ship was a magnificent vessel, glimmering under the sun as it cut through the waves. It was a family tradition to take a cruise every summer, and this year was no different. Mark and Sarah Thompson, along with their 2 children, Lily and Jake, were excited about the adventures that awaited them. The first few days passed in a blur of laughter and joy. They explored the ship, indulged in delicious meals, and participated in various activities. The children made friends at the kids' club, while Mark and Sarah enjoyed quiet moments on the deck, sipping cocktails and watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. On the 3rd night, after a delightful dinner, the family returned to their cabin. Exhausted but happy, they tucked Lily and Jake into bed, reading them stories until their eyes grew heavy. As they drifted off to sleep, Mark and Sarah shared whispers about their plans for the following day: a visit to a secluded island, rumored to be haunted. But as the clock struck midnight, an eerie silence enveloped the ship. The gentle hum of the engines faded away, replaced by an unsettling stillness. Mark stirred awake, feeling an inexplicable sense of dread creeping into his chest. He glanced at Sarah, who was still asleep beside him, her face serene and unaware of the growing tension in the air. Deciding to investigate, Mark quietly slipped out of bed and stepped into the dimly lit corridor. The ship felt different. It was as if it had transformed into a ghostly shell of its former self. Shadows danced along the walls, and the faint sound of water slapping against the hull echoed ominously. "Hello," he called softly, his voice barely breaking the silence. No response, just the whisper of wind outside and the distant creaking of the ship. He walked toward the main deck, his heart pounding with each step. As he reached the stairs leading up, he noticed something strange. There were no crew members in sight. The usually bustling corridors were empty, devoid of life. A knot formed in his stomach as he climbed higher. When he emerged onto the deck, he was met with a chilling sight. The stars twinkled above like distant eyes watching him, but there was no sign of anyone else. The lifeboats hung silently at their posts, and the music from the lounge had ceased. It was as if everyone had vanished into thin air. "Sarah, kids!" he shouted, panic rising in his throat. His voice echoed back at him, swallowed by the void around him. He rushed back to their cabin, flinging open the door. "Sarah, wake up!" He shook her shoulder urgently. She stirred, but opened her eyes slowly, confusion etched on her face. "What's wrong?" she mumbled. "Something's not right. The ship, it's empty." "What do you mean?" She sat up, her brow furrowing as she took in his frantic expression. "I don't know. I went out to check on things, and there's no one here. No crew, no passengers." Fear flickered in Sarah's eyes as she got out of bed. "We need to find the kids." They hurried into Jake and Lily's room, but found it just as empty as theirs. The beds were neatly made, and toys lay scattered on the floor, untouched. "Jake! Lily!" Mark called again, desperation creeping into his voice. They searched every corner of their cabin and then ventured back into the corridor. "Let's check the dining area," Sarah suggested, her voice trembling. As they made their way through the deserted ship, they felt an unsettling chill in the air. The once vibrant atmosphere had shifted to one of foreboding. Mark's instinct screamed at him to turn back, but he pressed on for his family's sake. When they reached the dining area, they found tables still set for dinner, plates half filled with food that had gone cold. "Where is everyone?" Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from below deck. Mark and Sarah exchanged startled glances before sprinting toward the sound. They descended the stairs cautiously, each step resonating ominously in the stillness. As they reached the lower decks, they stumbled upon a scene that sent chills down their spines. The lights flickered erratically, casting long shadows that twisted and turned like living creatures. And then they saw them figures lurking at the edges of darkness. "Who's there?" Mark shouted, trying to mask his fear with bravado. The figures stepped into the light, revealing themselves to be grotesque versions of humans, twisted faces with hollow eyes and jagged teeth bared in sinister grins. They moved in jerky motions, as if their limbs were not accustomed to movement. "What are you?" Sarah gasped, clutching Mark's arm tightly. One of the creatures hissed in response, its voice a guttural rasp that sent shivers down their spines. "We are what remains what you have awakened." Mark felt a surge of anger mixed with terror. "What do you want from us?" The creature stepped closer, its breath rancid and foul. "You should not have come here. Now you belong to us." Before they could react, more creatures emerged from the shadows, surrounding them with predatory intent. Mark grabbed Sarah's hand tightly as they backed away slowly. "We need to get out of here," he urged. They turned to flee, but were quickly blocked by another creature that emerged from behind them. Panic surged through Mark as he realized they were trapped. "Run!" he shouted as he pushed Sarah ahead of him. They darted down a narrow corridor, heartbeats pounding in their ears as they raced past doors that seemed to whisper secrets of despair. "Where do we go?" Sarah cried out as they skidded to a stop at a dead end. "Back up!" Mark shouted, scanning for an escape route. But before they could turn around, more creatures appeared at both ends of the corridor, closing in on them with sinister smiles. In that moment of sheer terror, a loud horn blared through the ship, a sound so far and yet familiar that it momentarily stunned both Mark and Sarah. The creatures paused briefly as if caught off guard by the sudden noise. "What was that?" Sarah asked breathlessly. "I don't know," Mark replied, trying to catch his breath while searching for any sign of hope or escape. The horn blared again, louder this time, echoing through the ship like a warning bell. It was followed by an unsettling silence that hung heavy in the air. The creatures seemed agitated now. Some began to hiss and shriek, as if sensing something was amiss. "Let's move," Mark urged again as he grabbed Sarah's hand once more. They pushed through a door marked "Crew Only," hoping it would lead them to safety. Inside was a narrow passageway lined with old machinery and dimly lit by flickering lights. They ran deeper into the bowels of the ship, desperate for an exit or any sign of life. But as they continued down the passageway, they stumbled upon something horrifying, a room filled with remnants of past passengers, clothes strewn about like discarded memories and personal belongings left behind in haste. "What happened here?" Sarah whispered in horror as she picked up a child's shoe from the floor. Mark felt bile rise in his throat as he pieced together what could have happened. The ship had been cursed or trapped in some dark fate beyond their understanding. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed behind them. The creatures had found them again. Their growls reverberated through the corridor like thunder. "We have to keep moving," Mark shouted as he pulled Sarah along deeper into the maze-like structure of the ship. They stumbled upon an emergency exit, marked with bright red letters, an escape route leading to safety. Hope surged within him as he pushed against the door, only to find it locked tight. "No, no, let us out," he yelled frantically as he pounded on it with all his strength. But it wouldn't budge. Despair washed over him as he heard the creatures closing in on them once more. Their guttural laughter echoed through the passageway like a death knell. "We're going to die here," Sarah sobbed beside him. "No, we can't give up. There has to be another way," Mark insisted desperately. As they turned back toward where they had come from, they spotted a faint glimmer of light peeking through a crack in one of the walls. A possible escape route. With renewed determination, they rushed toward it just as a creature lunged at them from behind. Mark shoved Sarah forward just in time as he felt claws scrape against his back. Adrenaline surged through him as he pushed against the wall with all his might. The wall gave way slightly under his force. They squeezed through, just as more creatures poured into view behind them. On the other side lay a darkened storage room filled with crates and barrels stacked high. an unexpected sanctuary amidst chaos. "Quick, hide," Mark urged as they ducked behind one of the crates. Just moments before several creatures burst through after them, breathless and terrified. They listened as footsteps echoed around them. Snarls and hisses filled the air, like a haunting melody. "They'll find us," Sarah whispered fearfully against his shoulder. Mark shook his head fiercely. "No. We'll find a way out." He scanned their surroundings desperately. There had to be another exit, somewhere within this maze-like hold. As they crouched low behind crates piled high with supplies long forgotten by time itself, they heard something else, a low rumbling sound coming from deep within the ship's belly. "What is that?" Sarah asked nervously. "I don't know," Mark replied cautiously as he peered around their hiding spot toward where it originated, an ominous vibration pulsing beneath their feet like a heartbeat echoing through steel walls. And then came another sound, a series of loud crashes followed by frantic shouting. From somewhere above them, the crew, other passengers, maybe were not alone after all, he murmured hopefully before turning back toward Sarah, who looked equally frightened, yet intrigued by this unexpected turn of events. But before either could react further towards this newfound hope or danger looming ahead, dark shapes began emerging from shadows surrounding them. Once more to be continuation. The silent voyage. The dark shapes emerged from the shadows, their twisted forms illuminated by the faint light filtering through the cracks in the storage room. Mark and Sarah pressed themselves against the cold metal of the crates, hearts racing as they strained to hear what was happening. "Stay quiet," Mark whispered urgently, glancing at Sarah, whose eyes were wide with fear. The creatures moved closer, their grotesque faces contorting into expressions of hunger and malice. But then, amidst the chaos, a new sound pierced the air, a voice, strong and authoritative. "Get back, all of you." The voice boomed, echoing through the hold. Mark and Sarah exchanged a glance, their fear momentarily replaced by curiosity. Who was this person? Could they be a member of the crew? As the creatures recoiled at the command, a figure stepped into view. It was a tall man in a tattered uniform, his face grimy but determined. "I've warned you before. Leave these people alone." He brandished a makeshift weapon, a heavy pipe, holding it defiantly against the advancing creatures. "Who are you?" Mark called out, unable to contain his curiosity any longer. The man turned briefly, his eyes scanning the cramped space until they landed on Mark and Sarah. "I'm Captain Reynolds. I've been trying to protect anyone who's left aboard this cursed ship." "Cursed?" Sarah echoed, her voice trembling. "Yes," Captain Reynolds replied, his expression darkening. "This ship is trapped in a cycle of despair. The souls of those who have perished here linger on, unable to move on. They seek to claim new victims to join them." Mark felt a chill run down his spine. What happened to everyone else? "The crew was overwhelmed," he said grimly. "One by one, they fell to the darkness that haunts this vessel. I've managed to evade them so far, but it's only a matter of time before they find me too." "What can we do?" Sarah asked desperately. Reynolds glanced at the door leading out of the storage room. "There's an emergency exit on the upper deck, a way to signal for help. If we can reach it, we might have a chance." Just then, a loud crash echoed from outside the storage room as one of the creatures lunged forward, breaking through the door with a terrifying roar. The captain swung his pipe with all his might, striking the creature back into the shadows. "Go! Now!" he shouted as he fought off the creature, giving Mark and Sarah a moment to escape. "Come on!" Mark urged Sarah as they darted toward the exit at the far end of the storage room. They scrambled over crates and barrels, adrenaline fueling their desperate flight. As they reached the door leading back into the corridor, they heard Captain Reynolds' grunts of effort behind them. "Don't look back. Just go," he yelled fiercely. They burst through the door and sprinted down the corridor, their footsteps echoing against the metal walls. The sounds of battle faded behind them as they raced toward the stairs leading up to the upper deck. Almost there, Mark shouted, determination surging through him as they climbed higher. When they reached the deck, they were met with an eerie sight. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an otherworldly glow over the ship, but it was also filled with shadows that danced ominously at the edges of their vision. "Where's the emergency signal?" Sarah gasped, scanning for anything that could help them escape. "There." Mark pointed toward a panel near the helm. It was marked with bright red letters, "OS signal." They rushed over and began frantically pressing buttons and flipping switches. But just as they activated the signal, they heard a chilling chorus of growls behind them. The creatures had followed them up. "Mark!" Sarah screamed as she turned to see them closing in, their eyes glowing with malevolence. "Keep going. You'll hold them off," Mark shouted, his heart pounding with fear and resolve. "No, we can't leave you," Sarah cried, tears streaming down her face. "Just go. I'll find my way back," he insisted fiercely. With a heavy heart, Sarah nodded reluctantly and pressed the final button on the OS panel just as Mark turned to confront the advancing creatures. A bright light shot up into the sky from the ship's signal flare, illuminating their surroundings in blinding white. "Help is on the way," she shouted over her shoulder as she pulled away from Mark's side. As she ran toward the lifeboats, she glanced back one last time to see Mark standing bravely against the creatures. He was outnumbered but fierce. He swung his pipe with all his strength as he shouted words of encouragement to her. "Go. Live. I love you." Tears streamed down her face as she turned away, knowing she had to survive for their children. She reached the lifeboats and frantically began releasing one from its moorings. As she worked quickly, she heard distant shouts approaching, the sound of rescuers. Hope surged within her heart as she climbed into the lifeboat and prepared to lower it into the water. Just then, Captain Reynolds appeared beside her, breathless but determined. "We have to go now," he urged urgently. "Where's Mark?" she cried out desperately. "He's buying us time. We can't waste it," Reynolds insisted as he helped her secure the lifeboat. With one final glance toward the ship's deck where shadows danced ominously in the moonlight, Sarah steeled herself and nodded. They lowered themselves into the lifeboat just as a rescue vessel appeared on the horizon, its lights flashing brightly against the darkness. As they drifted away from the SS Mariner, Sarah's heart ached for Mark. But deep down, she knew he had fought valiantly for their chance at survival. The rescue team pulled them aboard moments later, wrapping them in warm blankets and offering comfort as they were whisked away from the nightmare that had consumed them. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in soft pastels of pink and gold, Sarah looked out over the water, her heart heavy yet hopeful. She would carry Mark's bravery with her always and honor his sacrifice by living fully for their family. And somewhere deep beneath those waves, perhaps Mark found peace at last, his spirit free from the cursed ship that had once held him captive.